So also just to cover again, so for the fat and the muscle, we're using tet meshes. So with tet meshes, there's points inside of this geometry, so it's kind of like a jello versus the skin simulation that's more like cloth simulation. It's just going to be a flat panel. So for example, with fat on this vellum tetrahedron, for the fat you could see all these points internally. So it's just a blob of fat, and that's how the muscles also are done. Come back. But then skin. Oop. So stage 3 skin. Oops. It's a good frame. So the skin is nice to get all these extra finer details, so you can see the bicep area. There's some folds around the elbow, some shoulder creases, armpit creases. The neck area is nice with him, so he's got some fat rolls around his neck here. His leg has some folds. And it just comes and goes depending on the animation. Like here with this pec muscle and his armpit. So the fat was a tet, but this is actually cloth. So we start with our base geo, which is kind of low res. So we could use this, but all those folds that we're looking at, you wouldn't really get that with this topology. Well, for one, it's quads and it's not tris, but it's just too big, so it needs to be remeshed or subdivided. So we remesh that, and we get a lot more finer tris. And then we get our vellum cloth. So you can see this is the cloth geo. It's not a tet geo. If we go inside, there's no points inside. So that's our cloth. And then attach. So just like the other stages. Oh, this is a bad frame. I'll start back here. And that's going to attach to our fat. So here's our fat output. And this holding on the static pose helps our simulation settle in place before right away going to our animation. So it's a bit of a pre-roll. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 frames of pre-roll worked out for this shot. and that pre-roll is just copied over from the muscles to the fat onto the skin, and also we'll use it for the cloth. So we have our skin using the vellum attached to our fat. These are the parameters attached to geometry. And then, so you could toggle this on if you want skin slide. In my case, I didn't turn it on, but if you wanted to really pump up those folds on the neck and other areas, you just toggle this on, and then you could adjust your skin slide parameter, or your sliding rate, which is skin slide basically. And then this stiffness parameter, I just put a scale, so you could turn it 0.5 if you want half of that value. Let's look at our solver. So also just have substep of 1. And then this, I enabled collisions and also self collisions, but this is the ground position with this toggle on. So I did that, so his basically paw collides with this ground, a little floating, but without it he'll penetrate the ground plane. So with this on, if you have a specific shot or camera angle, you could notice that his feet actually make contacts with the ground, which helps sell your character even more. So let's see if you could tell really from this camera angle. Yep, slightly. You can notice his toes. Without it, they would just be pointing straight through the ground and be ignoring it. So this is a good little contact pass or ground collider pass. And it's nice on the Vellum solver, you could just toggle that on. So by default, if he's just walking around on the ground, you could have that. Otherwise, you could add other geometry if he's interacting with it to collide with. And then, let's see, does that, subdivide. So I'm getting even more finer geo, really small. But with that, I'm also doing a point deform with our other geometry. So we got our regular geo, smoothing it, this time using quads. The quads is what we're going to be using when we render. And then that's point deformed to our sim mesh. So we get the nice deformations from our sim, but we're going to render using our quad. Back one. And then from there, subdivide to get more of those finer wrinkles. This also helps if there was a minor fold, it would help exaggerate that, but also if something was a bit too sharp, it would smooth that imperfection out. So, there we go. That's skin, you can see here. Got some nice bicep folds. A bit leathery feeling. But in this case, I wanted that because I just wanted to make sure you actually feel those folds, because in general, it's always good to be heavy-handed with your character effects, whether it's like folds or cloth simulation. So in this case, my folds, I wanted to really exaggerate it because you could always dial that down easier with a smooth or reduce the settings, but it's usually easier to dial things down instead of dialing things up later in production. So there we go, there's skin. And so now stage 4, cloth setup.